Hi. By now you've probably looked over the essay assignment and you have read the section in how to write anything regarding literary analysis, and you probably started on the novel itself. This is a brief video to introduce the idea of literary analysis for you, to maybe give you a better idea as to why you even attempt such a thing. Now, a literary analysis is essentially a close reading of a particular text. What you want to do is trace a particular idea or theme that you find interesting to you or gets assigned to you throughout an entire text, to either sort of prove its existence or to follow its change throughout a particular novel or poem or play or something like that, or even film, so that you can kind of prove to the reader that this idea exists and this is something the artist wanted you to pay attention to. Now, what the evidence is in a particular essay of this nature are the quotes themselves. So as you read the book, what I would suggest is that you get a theme in mind, whether it be the idea of, in this case, the idea of the Western influence in hard-boiled detective fiction, or Gothic, or the femme fatale, or something of that nature. And read for that. Look for places in which something sounds Western-y to you, or if there is a Gothic moment where you have people like split personalities, people speaking in two voices or something like that. Note those in the text. You'll come back to those later on and write your essay about them. Now, one way to be successful is to remember that this is something that you do throughout a text. So you don't hit like 5 or 6 quotes in the first 40, 50 pages, or 2 or 3 at the end and call it a day. You do read the whole book and you look for examples throughout. Doesn't mean that you're going to find examples through the whole book, but one way to sort of break things down and make sure you have covered the book is figure out how long your paper is and see to what extent it gets divided up into the book. If you have a 3-page paper, you better come up with 4 or 5 quotes, maybe 1 or 2 quotes from page 0 to 100, 1 to 200, 200 to 300. Here we're at about a 6-page paper, so double that, okay? Now, in this particular essay, one simple organizing strategy would be for you to write an introduction with a thesis. You can do a brief discussion of what you've learned regarding, in this case, hard-boiled detective fiction from even my outlines or what you've looked up on the internet from academically acceptable sources. And then give a thesis statement. Now, the thesis statement should be something very close to that which I've assigned you. If you think that there are Gothic influences prevalent in this essay, then you are going to go ahead and prove it and say something like that. Before you get started on the actual proof paragraphs, you might then give a very brief summary, maybe 1 paragraph probably maximum, about who the main character is and what his problem is. You don't have to tell the whole book. You have to assume that if the readers want to know what happened in the plot, they can go to Spark Notes or they can read the book themselves. But after that, then go ahead and do 1 paragraph bit of evidence for each basically section that you want to prove. So if you have a good quote from one particular part of the book, then you'll write a paragraph about it. You'll start out with a topic sentence that might say, one place in which you see the influence of the femme fatale and Farewell My Lovely is when blah blah blah. In that paragraph, then you would write a sentence or two next, sort of summarizing the situation that you find the character in, who, what, and where, what's going on. After that, you might share the quote or a series of small quotes, and be sure and go online and look for, you can look at my MLA like style guide in writing aids. You might be able to find how one actually quotes something in their text. When you're done with that, then explain the quote. Don't just leave the quote there by itself as like there it is, enough said, all right? But once you are done with that, then move on to the next section. That would be one way to organize. Another way to organize would be, instead of kind of going chronologically, somewhat methodically through the book from there's a couple places in page 1 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 and 150, and etc. Another one might be organizing it thematically. And in this case, what you would do is you would go, well, you can see Gothic influence in both the environment and the people. And then you might spend a couple pages going through the novel once again, talking about when the environment seems Gothic-y, as in maybe if you see long stairways up to a house high on a hill, maybe you consider that somewhat Gothic in nature. If you see the fog rolling in or something like that, then maybe you can point that out. And then you move to the people. Do you see people maybe speaking with two voices, sort of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? That actually happens in a couple places in the book, and if you look for it, it's pretty cool. Anyway, but that would be a brief overview on how to specifically attack this particular assignment.